Okay, so this third video is going to talk about spellcasting, which is another critical component of the game called Forbidden Lands, and one that different to the skills because we use a very different approach to dice, and we'll talk about that in a second. So, love me flowchart, so we're going to start with the flowchart. So the first thing to note is spellcasting doesn't draw upon a skill per se. So you use willpower to fuel the dice on your spell. So if we go to our Roll20 character sheet for a second, and this time we've got our stone singing wizard, sorcerer, I should say, who is also a half elf, and that's going to matter in exactly 1 second. So, as it turns out, Lauren, who is our character, can cast Dust from the Deep, Voices of the Mountains, and Stun. She can also cast a range of standard magic spells, and we'll talk about those in a moment. And she can cast, she only has 1 rank. She could cast 2 rank 2 spells. For the sake of the game that we're playing, I've basically ruled that ineligible. If she casts rank 2 spells, she gets an automatic mishap, and mishaps in magic are bad. So how does she cast a spell? Well, the first thing she does is she decides which spell she wants to cast, and you'll see that each spell has a will of 1 at this point. So Dust from the Deep, Voice of the Mountain, and Stun all have 1 will point. So if I wanted to cast 2 will points, which means I would roll 2 dice, I will use up my 2 will points. The good news is, because Lauren is a half elf, she's got a talent called Psychic Power. So when she spends a willpower point to cast a talent, to use a talent or to cast a spell, the first one counts as 2, which means she's going to roll 3 dice. So we go to our dice pool, and I'll actually just make sure we don't have any accidental things, and we would click on that 3 dice option. So now what happens is we roll 3 dice. Now the strength of the spell is actually 3. So important note, she's already got a strength of 3 spell, and each success that she rolls will increase that, and each bane potentially raises the chance of a mishap. So let's see what happens. Oh, sorry, I hit the wrong button. Let's roll those dice, everyone. And we got 1 bane and 1 success. So what does that mean? Let's go back to our flowchart and just have a quick look. Okay, so she gathered power. She's not safe casting because it's not something it's not lower than her current rank. She rolled the dice, and we got 1 success, and we also got 1 bane. Now she can't push it in any way, shape or form, so that's all she gets. So for each extra success, and we got 1 extra success, so that's giving us 4. The power level increases by 1. So for example, if you spent 2 willpower to cast a spell and rolled 2 successes in addition, then you would get 4. Now that actually means they rolled 2 6s on 2 dice, which is pretty unlikely, but there you go. So our Lauren, who spent 2 willpower points, got a bonus willpower point in effect for being a half-elf, and then in addition got an extra success, which means the strength of the spell is 4. However, bad news bear time, she also got a bane, and that bane means we have to go and look at the mishap table. So let's do that for a second. So in the mishap table, there's a bit of knowledge about how spells work. You'll see there's everything up here. So let's just randomly roll what happens to Lauren to see how bad her day is going to be. So we roll a 66 and she got a 32. So if I go to the mishap table now, which is exactly what I'm going to do, she might have successfully cast a spell, but you are overwhelmed by the power of your own magic and feel that people around you are mere ants. Suffer 1 point of damage to empathy. So she would take 1 point of empathy damage, but have successfully cast the original spell that we were talking about, which, if I recall correctly, and I actually need to go to the right place, if I recall correctly, was Dust from the Deep. So we would have blown a thick cloud of rock dust from the ground to cover the zone you're in. It blocks vision and lets us flee without rolling. So we don't actually get any particular advantage for extra successes, we just get extra successes. It does help us resist some forms of people trying to dispel our magic, but beyond that, it doesn't have much of an impact. Interestingly, if we'd rolled this, if we'd actually been casting Stun, we would have gone, your song causes 1 point of damage to agility per power level. You can distribute this damage across as many opponents as you want. The targets may attempt to resist the effect by rolling for insight. Each one counts as a success. Each success reduces the damage by 1. So I could have done stun to someone and done them 4 points to their agility, and they would have had to roll their insight skills. So if it was Lauren who was resisting her own spell, unlikely, but there you go, she would roll 7 dice, which means pretty impressive. So we roll 7 dice, and we then go roll, and we see what we get. So she would have reduced that damage by 1. So she was the target of that entire process. We would have done 4 points of damage, all to her agility, and she would have only taken 3 because she got 1 insight success, which means the degraded value is 3, which means her agility, which is currently 4, would have been effectively 1 for the sake of this conversation. And look, that's pretty much how it works from Casting Magic 101. So let's now just talk about a few of the more interesting, let's sort of walk through that, and then the spell is cast exactly as I described here. So let's just talk about a few other additional elements of magic which we skipped over. So first things, okay, so as I said before, there's a rank to magic. You can have rank 2 in one and rank 1 in another. When you cast a spell, you have to use willpower to do it. The power level of your spell is based on the willpower that you invest, but it can go up or down depending on other things, including obviously that half-elven talent and also the success we got. We talked about overcharging magical mishaps. We talked about safe casting. So we sort of skipped over it really, if we're being honest. But if you cast it at a lower rank than your talent rank for that discipline, you may opt to roll 1 less dice for every point of difference. So that also means you reduce the chance of magical mishap, but it actually means it's also less likely to overcharge. So basically you're safe casting. Now, if you've got an ingredient, you can increase it by 1. So if we go back to Lauren's character sheet for a second, just for the sake of this discussion, we scroll down. So if she had had a fistful of dust in addition to everything else we did, so if you recall, we had 4 successes, it would have gone up to 5 because we would have also thrown the fistful of dust in the air, which would have given us 5 successes, blowing our opponents away and impressing everyone with our magical skills. Okay, every spell has a duration. That's measured in quarter days, days, minutes, seconds, or instantaneous. We have range, which is exactly the same as combat range, which we haven't talked about, but we will, and we obviously have that willpower. Some spells are rituals. We didn't have a ritual to cast in that. Well, I think Speak to the Mountain is a ritual, but we didn't use it. So as you note here, it takes a quarter day to perform, and sometimes they must have ingredients. So we don't need ingredients to cast a spell when it's not a ritual, but we do often when it is. We talked about magical mishaps. We also didn't talk about using grimoires. So writing it down, the spell requires you to first cast it once. You must spend a quarter day with a quill in hand, and you must roll a lore roll. It takes 2 full quarter days. So remember, we're not traveling. If we go back to our travel video, that's actually sitting down and writing. If you cast the spell from the book or a scroll, it is considered 1 step lower than usual in combat. But you've got to get a fast action off to actually pull the book out. So basically, it's safer to cast. Now, there's this concept of general spells, which is basically just another stream of magic, and it's available to all casters, and there's a bunch of spells in it. So Magical Seal, Sense Magic, Dispel Magic, Obscure Magic, Bind Magic, and Transfer. Transfer is kind of cool, because I'm pretty sure Transfer is the one that steals people's willpower, so it's very attractive for powerful wizards. However, it's a rank 3 spell, so if you are a suicide junkie, you can try and use it when you're a rank 1 caster. Actually, I don't think you can. I think you can only go up by 1. So actually you can't. But if you were 2 rank, you could, and at great risk to yourself. So let's just have a quick look. So rank 1, you can cast basically a magical seal on them or magical protection. And what that means is for every point of success or power that you put into that spell, the power of a spell affecting that person will be reduced by 1, possibly down to 0 and beyond, which means no effect at all. So it's like having magical armor. You can sense someone who's using magic, and if you want to know more, you can test that out. There's also dispelling magic, which is basically knocking magic out. There's obscuring magic, which is where you hide your own magic. There's bind magic, which is where you attach the spell to a physical object usually. And then there's transfer, which we talked about, which is nicking someone else's willpower, which is like the superpower. Just as a small side note, the ranks are not open. Sorry, the different types of magic are kind of a bit prescriptive. So healing is a druid one, so only druids get access to it. I'm pretty sure the same with shapeshifting. Yep, shapeshifting also only druids. And awareness, which is the third of their magical talents. Then you've got symbolism, which is more of a sorcerer capability. You've got Stone Song, which is the one we just looked at. So that's what our friend Lauren has. And I think there's also blood magic, which is awful and terrible and, basically involves stealing people's blood and doing terrible things to them. Also, I personally like making them burst into flames. It's a beautiful touch. And there's necromancy, but we don't do necromancy because necromancy is bad. So we wouldn't do that. I'm not even sure if you can get access to it as a starting character. I could be wrong. That's the end of the short version of Magic in Forbidden Lands, just to help you understand how it works. Thanks very much for listening.